Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Not just because you clicked this video, but because something in you, some small voice, said I need to hear this. So before we dive in, just pause. Take a breath. Let your shoulders drop. You don't have to decide anything right now. You don't need to have it all figured out. You're allowed to just listen. Because today, we're going to talk about something that sits quietly inside so many of us. Something that shapes the choices we make, even when we don't realize it. Something we don't always admit, even to ourselves. The fear of being alone. That quiet, invisible weight. The thing that keeps us in places that feel heavy. That keeps us saying, it's fine, I'm okay, when we're really not. You're not happy, not really. But you stay. Because the idea of being alone? It feels scarier than the reality you're living in. And maybe, deep down, you've asked yourself, what if this is the best I can get? What if I leave, and no one else comes? What if being alone proves I really was the problem? If any of that feels familiar, you're not alone. You're not dramatic. You're not broken. You're human. And you're tired of pretending you're not scared. Let's talk about it. Why are we so afraid of being alone? Because no one ever taught us how to be alone without shame. They taught us how to be chosen, not how to choose ourselves. From the start, we're taught that love is the goal. That relationships are proof we're worthy. That being wanted is the highest compliment a person can receive. So we chase it. We settle for it. We wrap our identity around it. And we start believing that being alone means we failed. That we're too much. Or not enough. That the people who left us knew something about us we were trying to hide. So we stay. Even when it doesn't feel good anymore. Even when we feel lonelier next to them than we do on our own. Even when we keep compromising ourselves just to avoid that quiet, empty space. We think being alone means no one chose us. We think it means we lost. But what if being alone means we're finally choosing ourselves? The truth is, you can be deeply lonely with someone lying next to you. You can feel unseen with a ring on your finger. You can lose yourself in a relationship that looks perfect from the outside. And the longer we stay out of fear, the more we believe that fear is fact. We start thinking, I can't survive without them. No one else would want me. If I leave now, I'll regret it forever. But those aren't facts, they're fears. And fears aren't meant to lead your life. They're meant to be heard, held, and gently let go of. Being alone doesn't mean unloved. It doesn't mean forgotten. It doesn't mean broken. It means available, to rest, to heal, to rebuild who you were before the world told you you weren't enough on your own. Sometimes being alone isn't what breaks you. It's what saves you. Her name is Claire. And she almost stayed forever. Not because it was good. Not because it was love. But because leaving meant facing something she had spent her whole life avoiding. Being alone. She met Daniel when she was 26. He was charming. Confident. A little older. The kind of man who walks into a room and fills it. He knew what to say. What to do. What to offer. And at first, he made her feel like the most important person in the world. He opened her doors. Sent her songs. Asked her deep questions. She felt chosen. And when you've spent most of your life wondering if you're too much or not enough, being chosen feels like a miracle. But then came the shifts. Quiet. Subtle. Easy to excuse. He started teasing her in ways that didn't feel funny. Rolling his eyes when she shared her opinions. Making little comments about how she dressed, always wrapped in "I'm just trying to help." And then, the help became criticism. The conversations became one-sided. The space between them grew, but the fear in her kept shrinking. Still, she stayed. Why? Because she'd been taught that love means effort. That relationships are hard. That she just needed to give more, try more, be more. So she swallowed her discomfort. She brushed off the hurt. She convinced herself that this was normal, and that people would kill to have what she had. After all, he didn't cheat. He didn't yell. He didn't leave. But in so many ways, he was already gone. And she was slowly going with him. Claire stopped wearing the dresses she liked because he said they were too loud. She stopped talking about her dreams because he said they were unrealistic. She said yes to plans she didn't want, stayed quiet during moments that hurt, and smiled when her heart was aching. Every time she thought about leaving, a voice inside would whisper, "But what if this is the best it gets? What if I leave, and end up alone forever? What if I'm being ungrateful, dramatic, selfish?" So she stayed. Even though she cried more than she laughed. Even though she felt small in her own home. Even though her reflection looked more like a stranger than herself. There wasn't one big blow-up. No betrayal. Just a slow, quiet disconnection between her and the life she thought she wanted. Then came the moment she couldn't ignore. They were out to dinner with friends. Someone made a joke about being single. Daniel leaned in, smirked, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Claire would never make it on her own. She needs someone to take care of her." The table laughed. Claire did too. But inside, something stopped. Not in anger. Not even sadness. It was a quiet stillness. Like someone had finally turned the volume down on the noise in her head, and she could finally hear herself think. That night, she didn't fight. She didn't cry. She didn't explain. She just got quiet. And the next morning, she booked a cabin. Alone. A weekend away. No big announcements. No grand exits. Just space. And in that space, something inside her unclenched. She drank her coffee on the porch and listened, not to podcasts or people or Daniel. To herself. And in that silence, she heard a voice she hadn't heard in years. "You're okay. You're safe. You don't need to be needed to be enough." That weekend didn't fix everything. But it broke the illusion that she couldn't survive without him. It showed her something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. Not because it was easy. But because it was real. And real, even when it's lonely, is always better than being lost in something fake. Because loneliness inside a relationship doesn't always come with shouting or slamming doors. Sometimes it comes dressed as silence. As polite dinner conversations. As going through the motions. It's the kind of grief that doesn't get flowers or sympathy. It doesn't even look like grief. But it is. Claire didn't stay because she was blind to what was happening. She stayed because somewhere deep down, she believed that this emptiness was safer than the unknown. Safer than walking into a life without him. Because even if it hurt, at least it was familiar. And sometimes, familiar pain feels more bearable than unfamiliar freedom. When you've spent most of your life being the one who keeps the peace, who doesn't make waves, who shrinks just enough to be easy to love, you don't even notice you've disappeared. You just get really good at managing discomfort. At telling yourself, it's not that bad. At celebrating crumbs because they're better than nothing. You forget what it's like to be full. There's a different kind of heartbreak in realizing you've been starving for years and calling it love. In waking up and realizing that the only person who hasn't left you is the one inside you who's barely holding on. And it's not that Claire didn't want to leave. It's that she didn't believe she was allowed to. That voice in her head, the one that had learned to question her own feelings, to distrust her instincts, told her that being alone would break her. That she wasn't strong enough. That no one else would want her if she walked away. But the truth is, the longer she stayed, the more she was leaving herself. Little pieces at a time. Her laughter. Her spark. Her voice. All packed away and hidden just to avoid being alone. What changed wasn't a fight. It wasn't some dramatic event. It was a moment. A pause. A quiet realization that she didn't have to keep disappearing just to keep the relationship alive. She remembered what it felt like to hear her own voice. Not the version of her voice that made everything okay for everyone else. Her true voice. The one that asked, softly, "What if I'm not wrong for wanting more?" She started asking different questions. Not, "How do I fix this?" but "Is this worth fixing?" Not, "Does he still love me?" but "Do I love who I am when I'm with him?" And that changed everything. Because when you finally stop running from the silence, you start hearing the truth. And truth doesn't scream. It whispers. It comes slowly, gently, through long walks, through quiet weekends, through a sentence in your journal that makes your hands shake. For Claire, it was the moment she sat alone with her coffee and didn't feel empty. She didn't feel amazing, or powerful, or free. She just felt still. And that stillness? It felt better than the chaos she was used to calling home. It didn't mean she was ready for everything. It didn't mean she didn't still miss him sometimes, or doubt herself, or cry in the middle of the night. But it meant she wasn't pretending anymore. And not pretending is where healing starts. Because choosing yourself doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like sitting on the floor and letting yourself feel everything you've been avoiding. Sometimes it looks like saying, "I don't know what's next, but I know I can't stay here." And in that moment, that's enough. If any part of this feels like you, if you've stayed longer than you wanted to, if you've silenced your own voice just to be loved, you're not broken. You're just tired. And underneath that tired is a quiet, steady strength that's still there. Still waiting for you. You don't have to make a huge decision today. You don't have to leave everything behind. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You just have to start coming back to yourself. One small moment at a time. Maybe it starts like this. You sit in silence and breathe, just for 5 minutes. You cancel one thing you don't want to do. You answer a question honestly, even if your voice shakes. You stop explaining yourself to someone who doesn't listen. That's not rebellion. That's recovery. Recovery from a life that taught you your needs were too much. Recovery from stories that made you believe loneliness was the enemy. Recovery from the lie that love means staying quiet. You're allowed to want love. Deep love. Steady love. But that love doesn't have to come at the cost of your peace. Of your voice. Of your body trying to hold it all in. You're allowed to be scared. You're allowed to grieve. And you're allowed to stay soft while learning to be strong. If you need a place to start, here are a few gentle ways. Ask yourself each morning, "What do I need today?" Then actually listen. Notice what drains you. Who drains you? And what brings you just a little bit of light, even for a moment. Practice saying no in low-stakes places. No to extra tasks. No to forced conversations. No to pushing past your limits just to be polite. Find one space where you don't have to be okay. A journal. A safe friend. A voice note you never send. Somewhere you can tell the truth. Joy doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's a quiet walk. A meal you eat slowly. A song you forgot you loved. You're not meant to live in survival mode. And love, the real kind, will never ask you to sacrifice your soul for closeness. One last thing before you go. You don't need to be fearless to begin. You don't need to know how the story ends. Sometimes, healing starts with a whisper, not a roar. A soft, almost invisible choice to stop disappearing. So if you're sitting in the quiet right now, wondering if you'll be okay, you will. Because you already are. And the moment you start saying no to what's breaking you, you start saying yes to what can hold you. And that's where your story begins. If this spoke to you, even just one line, stay with me. You don't have to walk through this alone. This space was made for the ones who've given too much. Who've tried so hard to make it work. Who are ready to come home to themselves, even if they don't know how yet. Free Talks is for you. We tell the truth here, the kind that heals. We say the hard things. We learn, together, how to stop apologizing for wanting peace. So take a breath. Take what you need. And if your voice is shaking, say it anyway. You're allowed to take up space. To rest. To want more. And I'm glad you're here.